and I have existed for 22 years. You may ponder how a young lady of my years finds herself residing with her uncle, particularly considering the revelations I am about to share. Truthfully, I too never envisioned this turn of events. I am a student of graphic design, and the majority of my time is consumed by sketching, creating designs, and undertaking freelance projects. Existence has been arduous since my parents' separation during my younger years. I relocated frequently in search of stability, ultimately finding myself residing with my Uncle Caden. This was not an anticipated outcome. Ensure you subscribe to my channel so I can continue sharing more captivating true narratives like this one. And remember to watch this video to the end and like it, as this tale promises to be extraordinarily intriguing. Please click the like button to demonstrate your support. The narrative commences when my mother had to depart for work, leaving me in need of a temporary residence while completing my education. Caden, my uncle, was the sole family member capable of assisting. He has been wedded to his spouse Alice for several years. They inhabit a charming abode in the rural countryside, distant from urban life. I presumed this would be yet another transient relocation to a tranquil locale, but events unfolded contrary to my expectations. A few months later, I believed I had acclimated to the residence, the daily routine, and the serenity, or so I presumed. However, today an incident transpired that I must disclose. It began when I entered Caden's chamber while he slumbered. But before I elaborate, do not neglect to subscribe to the channel to remain informed about the continuation of this account. Allow me to share some insights about Caden. He differs from most uncles. To me, he has always been more of a guide than a familial relation. During my upbringing, he instructed me in cycling, household repairs, and even gifted me my inaugural automobile upon my 18th birthday. Thus, when my mother required someone to shelter me, Caden was the evident selection. He is considerate, forbearing, and exceedingly benevolent. Yet, it was not solely him. I was also cohabiting with his wife, Alice. She had been part of his life for some time. They exchanged vows 2 years prior, and initially, I harbored reservations about her. She is senior to Caden, and something about her made me feel estranged in their home. Initially, I occupied the guest quarters at the far end of the dwelling, striving to be unobtrusive. Over time, the awkwardness diminished, and Alice began offering counsel on culinary arts, housekeeping, and domestic affairs. We were not intimate companions, but the tension had lessened compared to before. I believed matters were improving, but lately, I have observed something inexplicable. The more time I spent with Caden, the more I felt an attraction towards him. His grins, the sporadic brush of his hand, and his gaze when he believed I was unaware. It felt distinctive. I could not disregard it. A palpable tension between us escalated, an energy impossible to evade. I am aware of your thoughts. Zena, what are you implying? He is your uncle. It seems preposterous. I concur, yet this bond is irrefutable. I attempted to dismiss it, convincing myself it was a figment of my imagination, but each instance we were alone, the ambience felt electrified, as if an unseen force drew us closer. Here is where events take an intriguing turn. One evening post-dinner, I was engrossed in a project within my chamber when I detected footfalls in the corridor. Caden had been resting for hours, and Alice was absent, socializing with acquaintances. We were unaccompanied. Initially, I paid little heed, but then I discerned the creaking of his bedroom portal. I hesitated, uncertain whether to permit him to repose or venture inside. Yet, an inexplicable force compelled me towards him. Silently, I opened the door, endeavoring not to disturb his slumber. He lay supine, one arm supporting his head, his visage tranquil in repose. The luminescence from the casement cast delicate shadows upon his countenance, rendering him almost ethereal. I lingered momentarily, my heart pounding. I could perceive my cheeks flush, my pulse accelerate. Never had I experienced such sensations. Perhaps I merely desired to observe him, or perhaps it signified more. I remained uncertain. My contemplations were disrupted as I inadvertently toppled a vase adjacent to his bedside. The clatter roused Caden. His eyes fluttered open, and for an ephemeral instant, our gazes interlocked. Bewilderment flickered in his eyes, yet something more, an emotion I could not decipher. He blinked repeatedly, attempting to focus, then emitted a drowsy chuckle. "Dina, what brings you here?" he inquired, his voice laden with somnolence. My heart raced as I fumbled for an appropriate response. I did not wish to appear intrusive, yet I struggled to articulate an explanation. My mouth felt parched. I did not intend to awaken you," I faltered, feeling abashed. Caden rose gradually, massaging his eyes. He bestowed upon me the same benign, patient smile he invariably offered, yet today, an unfamiliar gleam in his gaze quickened my heartbeat. He scrutinized me briefly before resuming his discourse. "It is all right," he expressed softly. "You are aware that you can always converse with me, Zena. I am present for you." I assented, yet my thoughts whirled. I was uncertain how to manage this peculiar sensation. The chamber felt oppressive, and I could sense my respiration accelerating. "I merely wished to communicate," I murmured. Caden's grin diminished slightly, and I believed I detected a fleeting uncertainty in his gaze before it dissipated. He gestured to the space beside him on the bed. "Approach, then. You can always confide in me," he articulated warmly. I remained motionless for an instant, indecisive, but an inner impulse propelled me forward. Without contemplation, I seated myself adjacent to him. The strain between us was palpable, more profound than ever. I could perceive the warmth of his physique next to mine, his fragrance permeating the atmosphere. Our proximity allowed me to discern his respiration and experience the rhythm of his chest with each inhalation. My heart hastened once more, and gradually, as if in delayed motion, I gazed up at him. Our visages were so near that I could sense his warmth. His stare was tender, uncertain, yet there was an additional element, a spark that sent shivers down my spine. "Zena, are you all right?" Caden inquired tenderly before I could respond. I inclined closer to him. My pulse quickened, and my breath caught in my chest. I could not clarify it, but everything felt so acute, as if the very air was electrified. Caden did not retreat. His eyes held mine with tranquil intensity. He remained silent, yet his breath hastened, echoing mine. The room grew warmer, the stillness between us intensified with unspoken sentiments. My mind was a maelstrom. Every event had culminated in this moment. I could not restrain myself. Gradually I leaned in. My lips quivered, as if in a reverie. They grazed his at first tentatively, uncertain, but then, as his lips met mine, delicate and gentle, I could not halt myself. My consciousness screamed for me to desist, but my body resisted. I craved this. I yearned for this. Caden's palm cradled my cheek, drawing me nearer. His other hand rested beside us, lightly touching my skin. I could feel the heat of his contact, the kiss deepened, and soon it was challenging to distinguish where his lips concluded and mine commenced. The remainder of the universe vanished. It was solely the two of us, ensnared in this inescapable bond. My thoughts raced with bewilderment, remorse, yet also with an unusual sense of correctness. What were we engaging in? Why did it feel so essential? There were no expressions to elucidate it, no rationale behind it. He withdrew for a brief moment, his brow resting against mine. Our breathing was labored, each breath tremulous and slow. I could feel his pulse once more against my skin, synchronizing with the swift rhythm of my own heart. "Zena." His tone was gentle, burdened with a deeper emotion. We ought not to, but I was uncertain I concurred. Something within me refused to acknowledge any justification to cease. Deliberately, I reached for his hand, entwining my digits with his. He did not withdraw. His fingers enclosed mine, grasping me as firmly as I clutched him. Our gazes interlocked, and for an extended interval, we remained silent. The gravity of everything suspended between us. Should we? Could we? My hand instinctively shifted to the nape of his neck, drawing him nearer. I kissed him again. This time, There was no vacillation, no apprehension, solely the overwhelming necessity to remain close to him, to experience his presence. Caden's hand glided down my spine, pulling me closer. The contact of our forms rendered everything extraordinarily intense. I was unaware of our destination, yet I was indifferent. I desired to linger in this instant where solely the two of us subsisted. My heart throbbed in my chest as his lips traversed to my neck, imprinting tender caresses upon my skin. I could sense his breath against my ear, inducing a shiver down my vertebrae. It was dissimilar to anything I had ever encountered. Intimate, all-consuming, and profoundly incorrect, yet exhilarating in an inexplicable manner. "Are you certain about this?" he whispered against my skin, his voice laden with yearning. "I do not wish to cause you distress." I shut my eyes, striving to locate my voice. Everything within me clamored to halt, to withdraw, yet I was incapable. The yearning was too potent, the necessity too compelling. I no longer desired to ponder, to interrogate anything. I merely yearned to be with him. "I am certain," I breathed, my hands traversing his torso, experiencing the warmth of his epidermis beneath my fingertips. "I crave this, Caden. I desire you." His lips discovered mine once more, and this instance the kiss was profound, more pressing. There was no retracing our steps now. The realm beyond this chamber held no significance. There existed solely the manner in which he evoked feelings of desire, necessity, and vitality I had never before encountered. The chamber appeared to enclose us, the illumination dimming as the potency of our connection amplified. Each touch, each kiss felt like an assurance of something more, something neither of us entirely comprehended, yet both were prepared to investigate. I could perceive his heartbeat, steady against mine, harmonizing with the cadence of my own, and even though a fragment of me still resisted the actuality of our actions, a much more substantial part of me yielded entirely. It was no longer merely kissing. It was more profound. It was a connection I could not explicate, a bond transcending verbal expression. "I have yearned for this for so long," Caden murmured, his breath warm against my lips. I could scarcely grasp his words as my hands wandered over him, feeling the muscles beneath his skin, the heat of him, the way he reacted to me. But there was no retreating now. There was only the attraction between us, pulling us closer in a manner neither of us had anticipated. Time seemed to halt as we immersed ourselves in each other, in the quiet cadence of our kisses, the warmth of our touches, and for the first time, everything felt correct in the tranquility of the chamber. We were no longer merely uncle and niece. We were two individuals connected by something profound, something more intense than anything I had ever experienced. The atmosphere between Caden and me was thick with tension. Neither of us stirred. Neither of us uttered a word. The hush was abruptly disrupted by the sound of the front entrance opening downstairs. We became motionless, my heart pounded, and I swiftly distanced myself from Caden. Alarm surged through my chest. What had we just done? What was transpiring between us? Remorse washed over me, but it was intertwined with something else, longing. I could not disregard it. I felt ensnared between the moment we had just shared and the actuality that we were entwined in something we could not readily reverse. Caden did not stir immediately. His gaze was fixed on mine, but his countenance was inscrutable. I could sense the warmth between us, the lingering intimacy that had not yet dissolved. "Zena," he whispered, his voice tense. Before he could articulate more, the sound of footfalls resonated up the staircase. Caden discerned a voice I instantly identified. My heart plummeted. It was Alice. I hastily leaped off the bed, my breath rapid and shallow. I was at a loss for what to do. My thoughts raced in every direction, but I could not devise an escape. Was I truly going to confront her after what had just occurred? The entrance to Caden's room creaked open, and there she stood, Alice in the doorway, astonishment etched on her face. Her eyes darted between Caden and me, bewilderment crossing her features as she absorbed the scene. "Zena, Caden, what is happening here?" she inquired, her voice wavering, but there was something more, an intuition perhaps that signaled something was amiss. I could feel the color drain from my face. Alice's presence was like a jolt of cold reality, and in that instant, everything felt awry. There was no means to clarify this, no way to vindicate what had just transpired between Caden and me. My throat constricted as I struggled to find words. I faltered, uncertain of what to express. Caden, now seated on the bed, appeared equally perplexed. His hand rubbed the back of his neck, evidently discomfited, unsure how to account for it. Alice's gaze shifted from him to me, and there was an unspoken comprehension between us. It was as if, in that single moment, everything altered. Alice perceived that something had occurred, something that ought not to have, but her response was not what I expected. Instead of fury or letdown, there was only a profound, disquieting sorrow in her eyes. She entered the room, shutting the door behind her. Her demeanor was authoritative, and the chamber fell into an unusual tense silence, akin to the calm preceding a tempest. "Zena, you must comprehend something," Alice articulated softly, her voice gentler than I expected. "There is more to this than you recognize, more than either of you understand." I gazed at her, bewilderment inundating my thoughts. What did she imply? What more was there? The stillness persisted even after Alice departed. Her words lingered in the air, imprinting a mark on both of us. Despite the confusion, her composed understanding and proposal of guidance bestowed upon me something unforeseen: hope. Alice was not enraged. She did not dismiss us. Instead, she offered us an opportunity, a chance that felt delicate and uncertain but still present. I glanced at Caden. His visage was a blend of culpability, bewilderment, and something else I could not quite pinpoint. He averted my gaze, his hands nervously rubbing together. I knew he felt the burden of what had transpired, the manner in which our realms had unexpectedly intersected, but the more I pondered, the more I realized that none of this was part of anyone's scheme. Events had unfurled beyond our command. What I knew for certain was that we could not disregard it. We could not feign ignorance. Alice was correct about that. The emotions and bewilderment, everything had to be confronted and addressed directly. "Caden," I murmured, my voice quavering gently. "What course do we take now?" Caden gazed at me, his eyes brimming with a blend of sentiments. "I am uncertain, Zena. I am confused about what to feel, what to ponder. I am unsure if I should be irritated, embarrassed, or if I am even permitted to harbor any emotions at all." His voice wavered, unveiling the inner turmoil in his words. He was conflicted between the profound bond we had formed and his fidelity to Alice, his spouse. The circumstance could not be remedied in a single dialogue. It was not that straightforward. I inhaled deeply and approached him, bridging the gap between us. I yearned to extend my hand to him, to console him, but I was doubtful if that was the appropriate action. I no longer discerned what was right. "I do not believe we will unravel everything immediately," I expressed softly. "But I believe we must converse, be candid with one another. This is too intricate to disregard." Caden nodded gradually, his demeanor solemn, but not irate. "Indeed, I am aware. I merely do not know the starting point." I grasped his hand, the contact both soothing and infused with tacit sentiment. We commence by acknowledging what transpired, what we experienced, what we continue to feel, and then we determine the subsequent steps. He nodded once more, his expression mildly softening. "It will not be effortless, Zena, but I desire comprehension. I wish to understand what is unfolding between us." I clasped his hand, the touch both reassuring and brimming with unspoken emotions. "I lack all the responses, Caden. I am unaware of what ensues, but I am no longer fleeing from this." We sat in quietude for an instant, both engrossed in contemplation, attempting to decipher everything that had occurred. There was no evident path ahead, no facile resolutions. The emotions, the bewilderment, it was all so overpowering, but what Alice had proffered was a lifeline. The opportunity to confront everything unitedly, to address the chaos we had discovered ourselves in. I glanced at Caden again, and for the first time, I felt that regardless of what transpired next, we would confront it with sincerity. There was no flawless remedy, no uncomplicated means to rectify matters, but there was optimism, hope for insight, mending, and perhaps even for something deeper. As I reclined, my thoughts whirled with all the prospects. I could not refrain from pondering Alice and her statements. Her composure and her proposal of empathy had unveiled a passage I had not even recognized. She had not spurned us. She had not censured us. Instead, she had granted us space to respire, to analyze what had happened. But those were queries for another juncture. Presently, it was merely Caden and I seated collectively in the hush of our mutual ambiguity. We both recognized that nothing would ever revert to its former state. The sole action we could undertake was to proceed with the subsequent stride, whatever that may be, and somehow jointly we would decipher it.